a lot of people. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, as president of Terena, I have the pleasure to welcome you here in Maastricht, one of the oldest city in the Netherlands, and more recently, a well-known symbol of European cooperation. I hope the city spirit will inspire us and will help us to reinforce and to consolidate our future collaboration at the European and at the international level. This year, our host is SURFNET, the Dutch National Research and Education Networking Organization. SURFNET is celebrating its 25th anniversary, and I'm sure they have made their best effort to make this conference an unforgettable success. Thank you to them for all their hard work. The theme of this year's conference, yes, you can applaud. The theme of this year's conference is Innovating Together. Innovation and collaboration will be the common threads of all the presentation, covering topics like infrastructure, applications, scientific development, and last but not least, European collaboration. I'm convinced that we have to be open and to think differently if we want to preserve and consolidate our position for the following years. The various speakers will put their ideas and their vision to inspire us and to help us to define our future. Even the conference itself is innovating. On Thursday, for the first time, we will have an open space event to seek input and collaborations for you bright ideas. We will open the floor to all of you, and so come along and get involved. Highlight an idea, make a noise, build some early engagement, work with your peers, and take action. There will also be a number of side meetings, demonstrations, posters, exhibition booths, and lightning talks that will be well worth seeing and hearing. Of course, all this would not be possible without the support of many sponsors and the hard work of the Terena staff. Thank you to all of them. And yes. And to all of you, I wish you a fruitful and successful conference. Thank you. So now the next speech is the welcome by John Arts, the alderman of the city of Maastricht. Mr. Arts, please.
Since the dawn of mankind, man has been searching for the Garden of Eden. Stop looking, you have found it. Welcome to Maastricht. When you were standing here 60 million years ago, then you were swimming in a sea, a tropical sea, and it was lying where now Spain is lying, because you know the continents have shifted. And in that tropical sea, microorganisms lived, and they died, and their skin became limestone. And very large fishes lived. We call them mosasauruses, a kind of dinosaurs. And they died also and came part of that limestone. And where you're walking now is a tropical sea of 60 million years ago. And it's important to know, because it's important to history. And the part of the geological period is called after Maastricht, at Maastricht 10, just like the Perm is called after a town in Russia. I go to you 2,000 years ago. Christ was born and Maastricht was born, because the first Romans came here and saw it was beautiful. They saw the river Maas, and it was shallow here, and they built a bridge and a fortress here. And that was the beginning, the start of the oldest city of the Netherlands, because it's 2,000 years old. And you can see the remains of the Romans still here, still on the Ons Lieve Vrouwenplein, the Ons Lieve Vrouwen church. You can visit, and Hotel d'Orléans, you go in the cellar, and you see the remains of the Romans who built there from the limestone. But you know, the Romans were Roman Catholic 400 years after Christ. They became Roman Catholic. Constantine the Great saw the cross when he had to go to battle, and they became Catholic. And we got our first bishop, St. Servatius, here in Maastricht 400 years after Christ. And it was very important because bishops became often holy men. And the people decided if somebody was holy. And when St. Servatius was buried at the Vrijthof, the second church, St. Servatius, miracles happened. His coffin, when there came snow on his coffin, the snow melted. If they had candles in that coffin, I don't know, because it was commercially very interesting to have a saint within your town. Because when you had a saint, or a bone of a saint, people came from all over Europe to visit that bone, to visit the grave of the saint, because they had no doctors, and they could only pray to God when they had mischief, or pain, or illness. And so thousands, hundreds of thousands pilgrims came to Maastricht to see those bones and to pray to God. So Maastricht flowered economically through that as a sort of touristic, religious town. Monasteries were built, many churches, and you can all find yet today in this town those buildings. They were never demolished. And Maastricht was also strategically very important, and walls and fortifications were built because of the area Maastricht was lying. In 1200, a poet arose and he saw Maastricht from the Pieters Mountain, and he said, "This is beautiful. It is so beautiful. We see the Maas, we see the Jeker, we see the valley of Maastricht." And he made the first poem in Dutch-German language, the first poem in Dutch-German language. But also many soldiers and many countries came to conquer Maastricht. And about 1600, Louis XIV, the king of the sun, came to Maastricht and tried to conquer Maastricht. And he had with him D'Artagnan, you know, the three musketeers. D'Artagnan was one of them, and he conquered Maastricht, but D'Artagnan was shot. I don't hope there are French here, because we shot D'Artagnan. It's a pity, but he attacked us. But we made it right again, because we are very touristic, and we have got 4 statues for our foreign enemy. So die in Maastricht and you get a statue. But you know, after Louis XIV, Louis XVI was beheaded, the French Revolution, and Maastricht was important in that French Revolution, because that Mosasaurus was found before the French Revolution. And it was world news. All over the world, they said in Maastricht, there is found a sort of dragon. And that proves that God didn't create the earth, but it's nature itself. It's millions of years old. And there came the French Revolution, and they didn't worship God anymore. The churches were not worshiped, place of God, but of our knowledge. And they started to seek knowledge. And we got physicists, doctors, etc. So we didn't have to worship God anymore. They discovered gunpowder, cannons. It was not good for Maastricht. It was about 1850. And yeah, no religion, no pilgrims. gunpowder, fortification, worthless, and what happened to Belgium and the Netherlands were parted. And very important here in the south, because we are near to Belgium, 10 meters across you find the border. So everything was lost in Maastricht. But there was one man, he stood up, he married a rich woman, and he said, every mischief is an opportunity. And he started factories, because the Belgians were gone, they started factories, and for 100 years, Maastricht had new wealth because of all those factories. Porcelain, crystal, paper, later limestone industry, and Maastricht flourished again for 100 years. But I have only 10 minutes, so I must pass the time very quickly with you. And after the World War, industry employment got less. We had coal mines here, and they were closed. In 1965, our Prime Minister came to Maastricht and said, the coal mines will be closed. 65,000 people were unemployed by saying that. It was horrible. But I say every mischief is an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. Every change in life, every crisis is a birth process of something new and good. And what happened, we got a lot of money from the state, and we could found a university, this building, the MEC, to get new impulses to Maastricht. We also got European summits. And the first summit, you get famous by it, but we wanted to get really famous. And we are Catholic and Burgundic. We like to feast, we like to eat, we feast carnival. But that eating went wrong, because all those leaders who came had something of that microorganism for 60 million years, I think, in the food. And it was not a top, but it was a pot. They saw very much the pot. But every mischief is an opportunity. So we said we have to get a second top. And we got it. 1991, Maastricht was for anew the top of the European Summit. And we got the Treaty of Maastricht that was negotiated here in Maastricht in 1991. You think it's from 1992. Yes, we can count in Maastricht. But what happened when it should have been signed, it was a lot of paper, when it should be signed, it was 1992, and Portugal was chairman of the European Community. But we are nice. We said to Portugal, don't mind, we take that over from you. It's a lot of organization. We sign it in Maastricht. You don't have to do all that work. And it was signed in Maastricht in 1992. And we were the world head news again. But ladies and gentlemen, is it to be proud of? I think so. Also, there's a lot of discussion about the euro, but it was a very important day for the European community and the history of Europe. I have tried to tell you something about my greatest love, and the love is not my wife, also, not my girlfriend, I don't have. But the great love of my life is the city of Maastricht. And I want to share it with you. I want you to enjoy it, because all I have told you is true. And you can see all the things I said still here in the city of Maastricht. And I have only 10 minutes, but you take more for yourself. You take your wives here, your girlfriends, your children, your family, visit Maastricht. Here you can see Europe in 1 or 2 days, whole of Europe, whole the history of Europe. It's here, Maastricht, whole the history of the world you can find in Maastricht. Welcome in Maastricht.
Thank you very much. I think everybody will stay a little bit longer here because... Okay, the next speaker is Luc Soet, director of the University of Maastricht, and I'm quite proud he's Belgian. So it's also a sign of the openness and the collaboration between the two countries. Look.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this opportunity to welcome you also on behalf of the Maastricht University. We're delighted to be part and to welcome you here in this city, which John Arts just so brilliantly told you about. Let me say a couple of things, primarily also as an economist and as being somebody who's been heavily involved also in discussions about e-infrastructure and more generally the importance of ICT. And I think it's of course fantastic to have this conference here, to have it organized also by SURFnet. It was already referred to by Pierre. I'm sure that Erwin will talk much more about it and the role which SURFnet has played in this country over the last 25 years in bringing about excellence in terms of the e-infrastructure in this country and being part also of the European initiatives on it. So why I would like to emphasize this a little bit, because I want to talk a little bit more in content terms about the importance of ICT for research, for universities, not just for education, but also for research, and what is the importance of keeping investments in SURFnet and the e-infrastructure today, even in periods of austerity, as essential for valorization and for research. As an economist, we like, of course, to reflect on information and communication technologies and their importance for activities like the ones most of you are involved in, and also in line with what John Arts, as the alderman of Maastricht, just mentioned, let me also make a historical parable a little bit in terms of how we could view the way research was carried out. And I refer here to two economists, Paul David and Dominique Forêt, who, referring to their children, actually wrote this beautiful parable of, on the one hand, a person called Rashid, a 17th century astronomer from the beautiful town of Fez, and Rachel, an imaginary young engineering postdoctoral student working in a Stanford University laboratory in the 20th century. And just comparing historically these two situations, it's fascinating to observe how radically research activities have been transformed by the way we can operate in a digital framework. So as they write in their story, Rashid invented a new telescope and wanted to transmit the details of his discovery to colleagues in Cordoba, Padua, and Salamanca. This was an arduous task because this kind of knowledge had not yet been codified at the time, and he had to copy all of his plans and notes by hand. Rashid then entrusted his precious documents to the northbound caravans in the hope that they would one day be delivered to his colleagues. There was little certainty of that happening. More problematic, indeed, are situations in which knowledge is basically memorized and passed on by word of mouth, because the circle of effective users remain confined to direct personal contacts. Moreover, as that circle is widened, there is an increasing risk of the content becoming distorted in the course of oral transmission and successive copying. Only recurring communications back and forth amongst each of the pairs participating in such a network of transmission would operate to limit the propagation of such copying errors. And the likelihood of that occurring, however, diminishes as the number of links in the human chain of communication increases. Hence, there are physical limitations preventing expansion of the community of people who can harness new knowledge and possibly further improve upon Rashid's design. Knowledge flows have existed throughout history, but as a rule, they have been few and far between and relatively feeble. And this is, of course, characteristic of the Middle Ages and of the history up to today, so to say, or to the last century, whereby you had pockets of islands of knowledge, but in their diffusion of knowledge, they were each time prevented to operate in a much more general way. If you compare this with Rachel, the 20th century researcher, you see that in their story, she invented a small robot, working out the engineering details with the help of a computer-aided design program. Wishing to inform her community, she quickly produced the relevant documents and plans with the help of graphic design, etc., etc. The next day, she gets back the responses to her proposals. And hence, the diffusion of knowledge operates at a totally different speed, has this main characteristics, as you all are well aware of, and you know them today. Now, in this sense, the logic of this story, and I refer here to Subra Suresh's one-liner, famous one-liner, Subra Suresh, the old NSF director, which basically allows you to see a world in which good science anywhere is good for science everywhere, in which the location of this kind of research, thanks to the possibilities of digital infrastructures, have allowed the emergence of what you could call e-science today. And that e-science, and this comes back, I'm sure, to some of the discussions you will have later today and tomorrow and the days after, has a major impact not just on the valorization of commercial activities, but particularly on the research activities themselves. And I listed here 4 following on the work of David Ossimo. First of all, of course, new scientific output, massive increased scientific output. Look at the numbers of publications you find across the world in many of these emerging countries. You have a greater role for inductive methods. To some extent, I'm sure I saw in your program, you will also have sessions on this. Everything becomes, to some extent, a genome project. Scaling up of serendipity. The way in which we indeed are waiting for research results to emerge from this serendipity framework in which we have this long tail of research output being very much dependent on the haphazard interventions of some researchers or the coming up to some results in research activities. At the level of the global world, for sure, there is a sort of scaling up of this serendipity, thanks to the linking of data, collaborative annotation, social network, knowledge mining, detect unexpected correlations on a massive scale. And you all know the examples there. Better science, think of the incredible growth in retraction watch, in the way in which we observe at each time where indeed research can be reproduced, where we can indeed have truly falsifiable research finding, and of course, more productive science. Look again at the amounts. You have many of these projects, the Hubble projects, where the reuse of science or the reuse of data is really the essence by which existing data is being reused, continuously reassessed, and allowing crowdsourcing of work and many other opportunities. So, this is just to make the point that the relationship is not just to this valorization in commercial sense, but also in terms of the solution of our grand societal challenges, which the European Commission has been talking so much about. Research itself is indeed confronted with massive, complex stories, complex histories in terms of, for instance, climate change, in terms of human cognition, in terms of cells, in terms of the elementary structure of matter, in terms of understanding how language works, in terms of social networks. In each of these areas, we have fundamentally complex science. We deal with data which is always scarce in the sense that it's data specific to a geographical area, specific to a particular time slot, specific to a particular set of agents we observed and we obtained the data from, but not of a much more generalized nature. We typically involve the need to solve some of those societal problems in terms of having access to large, extremely large data sets, and of course, in general, this involves multidisciplinarity. And the research challenges you will be confronted with as an organization are, of course, those which you observe at the level of each of the national foundations also funding your research. How do we move, indeed, from these national science councils, national research councils, to this global research council structure to address many of these issues? In each of these areas, you are to some extent the front runners. I've called it here, such as we have MOOCs, we need more. We need massive online open research in many of these areas, and I refer here indeed to Bill Press' keynote at the AAAS meeting. So in each of these areas, it's basically back to the e-infrastructure. In short, you are here to play a key role in terms of providing a new incentive, a new motivation to public authorities to continue to fund e-infrastructure as the essence of this international global research community, which so much depends on your efforts in terms of coming up continuously with new evidence in terms of addressing these many challenges we have today before us. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Soot. It's more than a welcome, it's a real introduction to the conference. Thank you. Okay, the next welcome speaker is Erwin Bluming. He's CEO of SurfNet, our host today and for this conference. Erwin?
Thank you, Pierre. The TERINA Networking Conference is our yearly fair in the village of European NRENs, something that not only TERINA is looking forward to, but also all the other villagers. And like a fair, the TERINA Networking Conference is about context, about fun, and about experience. I am proud that SurfNet got the opportunity to organize this year's conference together with TERINA. And 2013 is a special year for us at SurfNet. It's our 25th anniversary. 25 years at the forefront of innovation that only has been possible because of all of you here in the room. And that brings us to the theme of this year, and that is innovating together. We have many examples of innovating together in our community, and I will highlight one global and one European collaboration that managed to create something special to launch here today. And after that, I will highlight 3 challenges ahead. Last night, yes, really last night, for the first time, a transoceanic 100 gigabit per second transmission link for research and education between North America and Europe has been demonstrated. And in order to achieve this, 6 NRENs from Europe and North America and 2 commercial partners joined forces. And we have been able to bring this 100 gigabit per second to the floor of the TERINA Networking Conference. Without the exceptional work of a large team of people from 10 different organizations and across 9 time zones, this breakthrough for R&E community would not have been possible. And this achievement shows that research and education networks are at the forefront of innovation and thereby empowering our user community, universities, and research institutes worldwide. The impact of this development, however, will also be seen outside the academia and help stimulate the economy. So that's the first special demonstration, and that's the wrong button. Again. This is the right one. This year's conference topics, NREN 3.0, open science, big data, creating solutions, and creating infrastructures. And we thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could have crossovers between all these technologies? And with this in mindset, SurfNet found in Siena, PSNC, and University of Twente good partners to create an astonishing demo called Hologram. And you are kindly invited to try to play a game, control a robot arm, and be amazed and save the Leaning Tower of Pisa. These 2 examples, and that's the right way, these 2 examples are nice demonstrations of what we are capable of. But for us to remain relevant, we really have to innovate together for our user communities. And I see at least 3 challenges ahead. And hopefully, we can make some steps the next few days by laying the groundwork for solving these challenges. Because, as a first challenge, the advanced North Atlantic 100 gig pilot is not only a technological feat, it's also an innovation in how NRENs work together. A multilateral collaboration of research and education networks willing and able to push the envelope in transatlantic networking and then make the results available for all those who were not able to participate. And the question is, are we able to define a joint strategy in our community that leverages on small coalitions of capable NRENs to move ahead in a specific area and then make the results available to the whole of the NREN community at favorable conditions? In other words, can we leverage the individual strengths and the resources of all NRENs for the benefit for all of Europe in the global competition? The second challenge is that demonstrations and pilots are nice, but delivering services to our users that the market can't deliver, that is even better. And how can we become better in delivering true global services? And the third challenge is that our unique value proposition as NRENs is in the interaction with the users. and the ability to provide services that address the specific needs of the research community. And how can we secure this unique position? 3 challenges we need to and will discuss in many of this week's sessions. And therefore we need good ideas. But where do good ideas come from? A good idea is not suddenly there. It matures slowly and often combines with other insights. So, where do you see explosions of good and of bad ideas? Well, where the connectivity is large. The coffee houses during the Age of Enlightenment, the internet in our times. Areas where views are exchanged and enriched. Connectivity is the engine of creativity and innovation. And we have made every effort to combine the coffee houses of the Age of Enlightenment and the internet here in Maastricht this week in order to network the networkers. We have an amazing 220 gigabit per second here on the floor. The picture shows what has been specifically set up for this conference and the demonstrations you will be able to see during the lunch break. And we have made many opportunities to speak and meet new people and old friends. I wish you inspiring days, and keep in mind that chance favors the connected mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Always showing the future for all the others. So the first keynote speaker, we are finished now with all the welcome. The first keynote speaker of the conference is Pablo Rodriguez. Pablo is Director of Research of Telefonica. And he is also an adjunct faculty professor at the Department of Computer Science at the Columbia University, New York. Pablo will present his vision on the next wave of telcos innovation. So, Pablo, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for the invitation. I was asked by the major whether I'm going to talk about the vision for the future. I say that to discuss the future, you probably need to either live on it or invent it. But certainly, I believe that the famous quote that the future is already here is just not evenly distributed. It holds. And over the next minutes, I'll try to delve a little bit into it and see what are the opportunities that are coming ahead. Before starting, I'd also like to congratulate SurfNet on the 25th anniversary. I was still remembering when I did my PhD in Switzerland, and we started setting up the backbone of the multicast network, and we were trying to connect our computers to make sure that the internet that was just starting to pump a lot of content could scale well, and we could distribute a video and audio in real time. Now, what happened over the years is that that multicast network that we were hoping that it was going to boost the real-time delivery of content over the network, it actually started getting replaced by something else, something that it was more of a cooperative nature. It was peer-to-peer networks. And peer-to-peer networks, they were fundamental to a lot of the innovation that has been happening on the internet for the last decade. Here is an example of some of the innovation that happened then. It was the concept of file swarming, taking the file and dividing it into very small objects and then giving different pieces to different individuals so they could all help each other. And there were many other innovations, like, for instance, the incentives for cooperations with tit for tat, or making sure that the entropy in the system was always high, so you could find every single little bit of piece of the content that you would need. Now, if you look at the trends of peer-to-peer networks over the last years, you get a picture like this. These are the interests of people in peer-to-peer networks over the last 10 years, and you can see a declining interest on this very successful innovation that at a certain point, it carried more than 60% of traffic in a lot of the backbone networks. Is it so? Has it been really declining, or is it just integrated into everyday usage of what we do? And I think it's a little bit of the second. If you see what happened with these peer-to-peer networks, these cooperative schemes that people started taking their computers and behaving as a very large distributed network. Now it's everywhere. It is being used as a peer-to-peer data storage plane for Google or Amazon. It is used to help do the NAT traversal in a lot of the Skype communications and voice over IP communications. It's helping deliver music to your home through Spotify, using peer-to-peer delivery to accelerate the download of the songs. It provides anonymity for users to be able to navigate the web, or it even helps file delivery for large content distribution networks, such as Akamai. And what is the reason for this? Well, I think the reason is that a lot of people got tired of waiting for the network to support every single thing that it was supposed to support to be able to play, and try out different routing algorithms, different content-based naming protocols, anycasting, caching, indexing. Peer-to-peer networks all of a sudden became this platform where people could play. And with a very simple piece of software, you would just download it in your computer, and then overnight, you could just start testing your new routing algorithm. And in a sense, peer-to-peer started creating a new ferment of ideas that now are percolating into the future internet design, being the basis of a lot of the concepts that are now being developed with software-defined networking, with CCN, content-centered networking, and a lot of the more advanced search and database algorithms that we're seeing now in the industry. In a sense, peer-to-peer networks were a large experiment where, in the same way that Axel Rhodes started thinking about what were the right incentives mechanisms for people to cooperate and test things like the prisoner's dilemma. There were many peer-to-peer clients, each of them doing a different thing, each of them testing a different cooperation algorithm. And they started achieving completely an incredible number of sophisticated cooperation algorithms. In a sense, peer-to-peer networks have been evolving into society, and it's not only about testing out new internet protocols and algorithms, but now it is about testing out things like new coins. You get Bitcoin. How about a non-government controlled anonymous global currency? Or what about peer-to-peer lending? Or what about peer-to-peer cash sharing? Or this thing that we're testing out in Barcelona, where we are giving the users the capability to share their Wi-Fi connections with each other. And I don't mean just sharing with people that are roaming outside, but creating a mesh network where you recycle connectivity from your neighbors, and you're able to sum up the different Wi-Fi connections into one to be able to give you a lot higher speed into your home. Now, what can I say? I don't know how many of you have seen this. This is Burning Man. It's a week-long annual event. It's held in the Black Rock Desert in the northern Nevada. It fits about 50,000 people every year, and you get all sorts of experimental, radical expressions of art, self-governance, and tests for peer-to-peer experimentation. It's all great. We created a platform for development, for innovation, for creativity, and now it's percolating into all layers of society. However, this is Paul Francis. He's the director of the Max Planck Institute in Germany. And about 10 years ago, we were discussing about peer-to-peer networks, and he came up with this single slide. That he said peer-to-peer networks are doomed to failure in the way that we are building them now. And he was referring to the file sharing mechanisms that we were using at the time. And And when we asked him why, he said, you know, it's economics. It's simple economics. He said, you know, you're getting increased traffic, and you increase volume, but you are not increasing revenue. Users are going to get a lot of value out of it, but nobody's getting paid extra for it. So eventually the ISPs are going to reach customer saturation, and then you're going to start getting a lot of conflicts. You're going to have conflicts between the overlay of these peer-to-peer networks and the underlay, and because there is basically no economic incentives, there are no signals for these peer-to-peer networks to work well with the underlay network. Just to give you an example, most peer-to-peer traffic in Spain is exchanged, 42% of it is exchanged within the country. However, only 20% is exchanged within a single ISP, meaning more than half of the traffic goes outside of the ISP, while the content still exists within the ISP. Now, this brings me to the next topic, because I think that on the design of the future internet, we will probably have to pay a lot more attention to the network economics part. And what I'm seeing is a wave of phases that are coming through the design of new services that if you look at what happened in the 90s, it was mostly about broadband penetration. If you look at what happened in the first decade of this century, it was about wireless broadband penetration. And we're getting into a new business cycle that is still uncertain. What is going to be the new business model? What is going to be the new applications and services? Is it going to be finance? Is it going to be e-health? Is it going to be big data? Is it going to be machine-to-machine? A little bit of everything. But we're certainly getting to that point where there is a big question mark of what is the next business going to be. And in the meantime, what's happening is we're getting an increase in traffic and a flattening in revenues, saturation in the users, flat rates, and a decouple between the benefits and the cost, which hopefully we'll be able to solve through a lot of innovation and efficiencies. But it is important to understand where are the biggest costs coming today in some of the networks. What I'm showing here is the different parts of a network, from the platforms, this would be in the data center, to the network core, to the transport layer, to the IP network, all the way into the access network. And what you can see is that more than 60% of the cost in all these components goes into the access network. So it is the very last mile that consumes more than 60% of the cost in designing an end-to-end network. And now, if you look at where the costs go into running that access network, whether it's in design and development, whether it's in the implementation and deployment, whether it's the provisioning, whether it's the supervision and maintenance, or whether it's the basic infrastructure, you will find that more than 60% of the cost go into the supervision and the infrastructure and the maintenance. So basically the operations. And the reason is simple. Supervision, maintenance, and operation don't work with Moore's law. They don't come down at the same rate, in the same way that hardware does. And it's basically because it requires human intervention, human labor, and the speed at which we become better, it doesn't improve as fast as Moore's laws. Now, there is certainly a lot of room for innovation in this space, and I'm going to give you an example of one of them. This is a virtual operator that we've launched in the UK. It's called GiveGav. It's an operator that doesn't have shops. It's 100% online. The only thing that you get is a SIM card. And the beauty of it is that we use peer-to-peer cooperation for customers to help each other serve and answer queries about operational problems. So about last year, we were able to give £1 million back into the members that help other members solve some of their problems. And you know what's happening? The average answer online is resolved within 90 seconds. And it is getting about a growth rate of 400% because users not only are helping each other, they also feel they're part of the system. Now, the other problem that we're seeing is how networks are dimensioned and what is the cost of the core network. If you see most networks and equipment gets dimensioned based on the peak capacity. It's the 95th percentile. You take the statistics every 5 minutes, you chop off a 5th percentile, and then what remains, that's how you get charged, that's how you get billed, and that's how you have to dimension by your router, set up your links, and so forth. Now, if we see what happens on the internet, and we compare it to other distribution networks, for instance, physical distribution networks. Physical distribution networks are very good at moving things in space. So they're very good at moving things by railway, by boat, by plane, by car, and they optimize all the different transities and routes to get from A to B in the minimum amount of time. We also do a similar thing on the internet. We do it in the digital space. We pay a large attention to how we route the information to make sure that we minimize delays and we optimize the routes. Now, if you look at what happens in the physical industry, in addition to moving things in space, they're also very good at moving things in time. So they have stores, they have warehouses where they keep things, where they store them for a while to make sure that they can take care of the peaks and the valleys in the supply demand, or that they can use the most efficient routes at any point in time. So they can take it into a warehouse at an airport, keep it there waiting for the whole night, and then waiting for the chip plane that is going to come on the next day and do a chip shipment. If you see how we do that in the internet, we don't do it at all. We're missing that big component of moving things in time. We only do it at a very small time scale. We do it with TCP/IP. We have small buffers in the end systems, in the routers, that allow us to do control at very fine small time scales, but we are not able to do it in the order of hours or in the order of days. Now, you would be wondering, why is that useful? And this is the answer. Imagine that you want to ship a large volume of data, scientific data, for instance, that came out of CERN, and you want to ship it into Stanford University so they mix it with their data set and understand whether they found a new particle of God. What's happening is that this is the type of typical network behavior that you're seeing in the network. So you get some times of the day that you have a lot of usage, and then some other times of the day where the usage is very low. Now, these are 3 links in our operation network. This is one in Latin America. This is in Brazil. This other one is happening in Madrid, in Europe. And then this one is in China. Now, you imagine that you want to ship a large volume of data from Latin America into China. Then what happens is that when Latin America is waking up, so this is when Latin America is sleeping, Madrid is waking up, and then China is peak time. And the opposite happens when Latin America is on peak time, then China is going to be on the valley time. So whatever is good for one of the senders is bad for the receiver, and the other way around. So basically, you end up in this situation where you have these decoupled constraints that are time-shifted by the way the world and the planet moves, and how we keep waking up each other as the sun comes. And when we need to move data from one part of the world to another part of the day, we find these constraints. Now, what is lacking here is some storage in the network that will help us move things not only in time, but also in space. So take the data, store it in a certain location, and then wait for a while until the next opportunity to be transmitted forward opens up. And then you keep riding these valley opportunities that appear at any point in time in different parts of the network. Now, I've talked about a better network design. I've talked about some of the network economics. But certainly, some of the things that will drive the next demand into networking equipment and a lot of the research and innovation will be the Internet of Things. And if you allow me, the Internet of Things now is a disaster area. It is just hold into some small deployments or for very large corporations, fitting into a car, fitting into some vending machines. But the end user, the startups, the people are not touching it yet. They're not playing, and if you want creativity, you need to open it up. This is how the Internet of Things should look. It should look like a place that is similar to the physical world and that it allows for a lot of imagination and creativity. And instead, this is how it looks today. It is a black box. It is restricted to large companies that spend a lot of money into this tailor-made equipment that it is very hard to do an open platform out of that. Now, let me tell you what we did. We got together with Arduino, which is the largest open hardware platform in the world, and we thought that a lot of people had started working with Arduino, playing with it, giving it to developers to see what is it that we could do, they could do with it. But there was something missing, and it's that they couldn't have ubiquitous connectivity. So what we did is we built a shield, a GSM shield. This is the shield that we built on top of Arduino that basically gives you roaming-free 3G and 2G connection anywhere in the world. So you can go into Arduino shop, and while you buy your Arduino hardware component, you can also buy a the SIM card with a shield that allows you to just use a plug and play and start working with it and start playing with it. Now, I'm going to show you a video of one of the things that we did. This was an experiment that we did with some designers, a couple of artists, that we asked them to think about how to use Arduino in a new way, something that had never been done before, and what is it that they could do with this platform using this 3G connectivity. Now, what they thought about, what they came up with, was how to apply Arduino to children, to toys. So they created a new toy, a toy that basically is full of intelligence material, that is full of sensors, and that you sell them in pairs, you give them to kids in pairs. And one of them takes it home, and the other one could be in Latin America. But the nice thing is that both toys are connected, and they talk to each other through emotions. It is a new way of communicating. It is a new way for kids to express emotions. And the fact that it's always on, they can carry it on the bus, they can take it in the park, and both kids are always connected. So when you rub one of the toys, the other one giggles, or when you squeeze the other one, this one makes a noise. And it's this concept that if by enabling this open platform, you start thinking about things that were not possible before. Now, let me give you another example. When we looked at this Internet of Things, we realized that it was this black box. And while we were working with Arduino, we understood that the set of things that people wanted to do was immense. We could never come up with all the different use cases that people were going to do. So we started thinking about building something that it was modular, that it was a little bit of a platform. And we came up with this thing that we call thinking things. They're a bit like Lego bricks. And these different bricks, each of them has a different functionality. So one of them has a battery. The other one has a 3G connection. The other one has a temperature sensor. The other one has a humidity sensor. The other one has a pressure sensor. And then you can just combine them in whatever way you want to develop your own use case. And the nice thing is that people just come up with their own use cases and start using them every day. I'm going to show you this video. This is from a chapel in Spain, and it's This is a priest in the chapel, and basically he lives in the nearby city, and he cannot visit the chapel every day, especially when it rains or there are problems, but he wants to make sure that if there is humidity, he gets alerted, he gets an SMS. So he combined these 3 modules, and with a simple click of a button, he can just place it in the chapel, and if there is any emergency, if the window broke and water starts coming in, he can just go up and try to fix the problem. Taking Wi-Fi into that place was costing hundreds of euros. This solution cost about tens of euros. And now, can you start thinking about connecting not only chapels, but connecting all sorts of objects in the home, right? This is a plant that we connected a few modules, and when the plant doesn't get water, it complains on Facebook. So the plant has a Facebook account, and it says, please come and water me. And then when you water the plant, it actually says, I like it. So, you know, we have network economics. How peer-to-peer allow us to play into a large playground. Internet of Things, hopefully, if we open up the platform and open source the reference designs, we'll get a lot more people playing on it and inspiration and ideas. And I think the next big area where there are opportunities is probably big data. And big data in particular from the cellular phones. You know, for you to receive a phone call, somebody needs to know where you are. And for you to get charged and billed, somebody needs to understand what are the number of calls and to improve the service. Cellular phone data generates a large amount of data. Here it is, for instance, the amount of data that is generated by cellular phones in the UK alone and compared to all the Google data, and it's a very significant data. With this data, you can do things like this. For instance, you can see what are the top 10 areas in Barcelona that are visited by American tourists on every hour. And you can see which are the clubs, which are the restaurants, which are the places that they go. But you can also do some interesting things like this, where you can count the average number of days that different tourists spend in Barcelona when they come for vacation. And if you have an Airbnb apartment, then you can better target your offering, your website, understand that probably you're getting a lot more Russians coming into Barcelona, and that probably you should translate your website into Chinese Mandarin of a certain canton, because that's the type of tourists that you're coming in. And certainly, this cellular phone data will help us design smarter cities. This is a visualization of the set of places that people like me go based on the data that I have in Madrid. And basically, based on different phone fingerprints, so time of the day, location, we are able to understand how different parts of the city are either an industrial part, and that was the red part, or they are commercial places, and or this is nightlife, this is where my friends go and get a drink, or this is where you go for leisure and sports, or the next one is what type of transport is amenable for you in that city. Now, can you imagine the use for this for mayors, town halls, city planning and designing, where to place the next Starbucks? Where do you need extra police in the city? What stores should we have around Walmart? Nike brings out 60 different shoes in the stores every week. Out of these 60 stores, out of these 60 pairs of shoes, 59 get retired. With this data, we can probably help Nike decide which ones to retain and which ones to throw, just by understanding how people move in the city. But more importantly, what we're realizing is that big data has opportunities not only to help cities, but to help in the health space. We understand that there is a big correlation between diabetes and your everyday habits. Which places do you visit, how much you walk, what do you do in everyday life, but not only to diabetes, but other diseases, like, for instance, bipolar disorder. The cost of e-health is about to explode by a factor of 10 in the next decade. If we don't do something about it, the cost will be unbearable. So by using big data, we can probably start walking the path of preventive health care. Bipolar disorder patients, they have these two modes. They either go into depression or they go into mania. Now, the nice thing is that if you catch them early, your chances of reducing their bad period increases by about 75%. And what happens is that as they go into this depression or mania behaviors, their communication pattern, their activity patterns changes. And this is something that doctors can spot and can give the right medication at the right time. A recent study says that doctors will be able to reduce about 600 euros per patient in medication, and that the average episode of bipolar disorder will be brought down between 600 days to about 150 days if you are able to use the patient's cellular data to be able to predict when is it going to go into remission. Now, in addition to understanding what is it that, how big crowds move, if you get a sample like this of the different spots that people are making communications on, you can start drawing trajectories of how people are moving across the different places or the cities. Now, this is an example of how these trajectories, how do you go from point A to point B, is very useful. This is the Roya fungus. It's a fungus that is killing the crops in Guatemala. It's actually the coffee plantations. And we've got together with the United Nations. We collected data in Guatemala for several months, and we're trying to understand how is it that the moving of population from Ecuador into Mexico through Guatemala can affect the spread of this virus, and where is it that the local health governments can put the most resources to try to stop this virus and killing the local economy. So that's all great, but if you look at your cellular phone data and you start thinking about it, it's actually a social network. And it's a very important social network. It is made out of people that you call, as opposed to Facebook that is made out of friends that most of the time is not sure that you're real friends, right? Now, this is my social network. This is my social network on my voice social graph. I'm in the middle, and the nodes around it are the set of people that I call, at what time and the distance to me. It means how close they are to me. And it's a graph that is not explicit, but it's implicit. And it has some nice properties. It's a universal graph because of the innovation that happened about 40 years ago with GSM, that we can all make phone calls to each other. It's a very strongly authenticated graph, so it's very hard to get another phone number as opposed to just getting a million different usernames and passwords. And a lot of private communications go through it. So it'd be interesting for me to understand how this graph looks and what is it that I can do with it. Probably, if you look at this social graph, it's probably one of the largest social networks in the world. I'd say it's the second largest social network in the world. And this graph, you probably can use it to help you define your trust and your reputation. I don't know how many of you have Clout, K-L-O-U-T, which is a company that helps you define what is your trust and your reputation based on your Twitter activity. How many people follow you, how many tweets you make, how many retweets you make. Can you imagine what would be your credit score, your cloud, based on your phone activity? And, women in the US are now picking guys based on the credit score. Would it be useful to have a good credit score? So having this information and giving it back to the customer, it is something that it is very important. It is something that if you provide value to the end consumer, if you give them the data back to them, they will be able to start using it in ways that we cannot imagine today. Why not using that trust score to find things that you like? For instance, we ran an experiment in Spain where people would opt in to share their phone graph, and we ran this search engine. This is the example for houses to rent a flat, but we ran one for nannies, where the results were re-ranked based on the distance on the voice graph to the people that were offering the flat or that were offering the nanny services. Wouldn't you have to have a nanny taking care of your children that is a trusted one, that has worked with a friend of a friend, and that has a good relationship with them? The applications are endless, and what we're realizing is that the pattern of calling predicts a lot of people's behavior. We've realized that calling connections and calling patterns change as people become more wealthy, but also change with people's moods. This is an experiment that we did where we tested the number of calls an average person makes, the average time that they take on answering a call or answering a message, the set of position that they have in the network, whether it's on the weekend or not, how long they take to reply to a dear friend. And based on that, it is very easy for you to understand how is it that you're feeling, whether you're feeling more extrovert, more conscious, more agreeable, more open, and it is important for you to have this information so you can understand what to do with it and better plan your life. So what we're seeing is that we're going in an internet that was designed for communications to an internet that is now being used for content and video, to an internet that is going to be used for data, and in particular for personal data, because we are traces of bits. Every time we do something on the internet, we leave our whereabouts, our trails of activity. And what worries me is that if the data is the new oil, who owns that data, and how about privacy? Kundera used to say that police destroy privacy in communist countries. The journalists did it in democratic countries, and people themselves are losing a taste for a private life and a sense of it. I believe if we take that data and give it back to the consumers, we create a platform and they can experiment, they're going to be able to get a lot of value from it. And it is important that consumers understand about themselves as much as others understand about them to decide how to take the next steps. Now, I think this is important from a regulation point of view. So if you see what's happening in the EU and in the US with the EU Data Human Rights and the US Data Bill of Rights, the right to be forgotten, the right of portability, how to enable data transparency, traceability, revocation, fingerprinting. What happens when you die? Will I write a will on my data? Who will I donate that data to? Will I leave it for my dear friends so they understand how I live my life, what decisions I took in the tough times? What I envision is that we're going to be moving from the computer as a platform to the cloud as a platform, to the individual as a digital representation of itself as a platform. And to do this, we are running an experiment in the city of Trento, where we are asking people to opt in to live in the future. We actually give them mobile phones, hundreds of families, and we ask them, do you want all your information to be recorded? And we're going to give it to you, and we're going to give you some applications and services, so you better understand what value you can get out of it. And why not? Maybe you can take your soul and sell it to the devil. This is the example of a Kickstarter, a person that recorded everything that he's doing, and he's putting it for sale. on the internet. He already got 193 people trying to buy it, and he's getting about $2,000 for everything he browses, everything he sees. I don't know if I have a video, but I'll try to show it to you right now.
Hi, I'm Federico Zagno, and here is all of my own data. Since February, I've violated my own privacy, and I've recorded my online activity, which includes the website I visit, what I post, the video I watch, what I buy, my emails, my chats, and more. I've generated so far 1.5 gigabytes of text, which is equivalent to 1,500 books, and I've taken 30,000 photos. Meanwhile, corporations have been using my data for their own profit. They use and they sell my data. Often, we don't understand that by signing the terms of services, we give away the rights to all our own data. In 2012, in the US, the ad revenues was $30 billion. In 2013, the estimates are for $40 billion. In 2012, I personally made $0. So, is my personal data worthless to me? I'm selling my data for $2. For $2, you get an entire day worth of data bundled in a single folder, which includes the website I visit, an image of my face looking at the computer taken every 30 seconds, a screenshot of the page that I was looking at, my GPS location, the position of my mouse, and a logs of the application that I was using. Your contribution will give you access to my data and will allow me to finish a browser extension and an iPhone app that allows you to do the same. If more people do the same, one day marketers might pay us for our own data. If you are interested in selling your own data and turn them into a profit, please support this campaign. Thank you for your support.
We wrote a paper about this about a couple of years ago, and we call it "For Sale: Your Data by You." And we found similar results where some people were willing to sell their data, and the amount of money that you were getting, it varied. But it's an important question: how much is your information worth? How it dilutes over time? What is the importance to different people? I think we're getting into this era where we're going to have some of those debates, and what we're doing in Trento, in this Living Lab, is going to try to answer some of those questions. And then finally, I wanted to discuss a little bit about how is it that all this internet thinking, all this innovation can actually help not only our industry, the digital industry, innovate and reinvent itself, but other industries. Can we use this internet thinking for others to do creativity? And it's not only, if you see the opportunity, it's massive. This is the amount of revenues that exist in internet connectivity today. It's roughly about 3% of the GDP. If you look at the amount of revenues that exist in the internet advertising, it's about 0.7% of the total GDP, a much smaller fraction. But if you look at the potential opportunity in helping other sectors like security, the financial, the public administration, the health sectors innovate, it's huge. It's about 6% of the GDP. A small improvement that we do there will go miles into having a lot of benefits. Now, why is it that I'm bringing this? Because I want to give you a couple of examples of things that our internet thinking, our design, and the learnings that we had over the last years on peer-to-peer networks, on designing complex networks, can have into these industries. This is a map of the internet that probably a lot of you have seen many times. But what you haven't seen many times is this other type of network. This is a network that is not a network of computers. It's a network of people. It's a network of soccer players. That if you start thinking at it from a networking point of view, very interesting things happen. I'll tell you what we're doing. We're working with FC Barça. We are gathering data of where every single player and the ball is in the soccer stadium every 10th of a second. We do this with high-definition cameras, and they take the information and then they convert it into a dot, into a square. And then we're trying to see what type of strategies work well and which one they don't. And we started realizing that when we talk to the soccer team, that a lot of the strategies that they use, they look very similar to the strategies that we used to design the internet. They used to play with a very centralization organization, right? It was a very hierarchical. Everybody used to pass to the middleman. And now they play a lot more peer-to-peer. We start understanding that all this tit for tat and the tiki-taka that Johan Cruyff implemented in Barca, they have a lot in common. And the question now is, what do they have to do next? Barca just got scored 7-0 in 2 consecutive matches from Bayer. What is it that, where do they go next to innovation? What we're looking is that by understanding the properties of this graph, by bringing network science and internet innovation into this field, we can help them innovate. We've realized that the teams that are higher entropic, meaning that the probability of understanding where is it that you're going to send the ball next do better. The teams that have high centrality do worse because you create bottlenecks. We are looking at different matches, how the different teams can create denial of service attacks and try to steal the ball from each other. And we are seeing how, for instance, greedy approaches, which we all know very well from networking, that tend not to be optimal, are not optimal in soccer either. It's not about taking the ball and running in front and trying to score as fast as you can. Most of the times it's about holding the space and optimizing the space rather than trying to minimize time. Now, I'm going to give you another example. I don't know how many of you know about El Bulli restaurant, but this is a restaurant that closed down about 2 years ago. It was the best restaurant in the world for 5 years in a row. You had 2 million bookings every year, and only 8,000 people could dine. You were eating for about 5 hours, a 35-course meal, and has been described as the most imaginative generator of focusing in the planet. I'm going to leave you with this video so you have a glimpse of it.
Por ejemplo, uno cuando va a comer en un restaurante de vanguardia, hay lo que se llama la moción creativa. ¿Sabes? Una cosa es qué bueno es, tal, y otra cosa es una moción que, joder, esto es flipante. No.
¿Cuántos días? Sabes, tú ves aquí. No de manera, ¿eh?
Això ja fèiem, no?
Aquesta, no?
Champiñón sí, ¿no? Yo he probado champiñón.
No sé si son 2 platos o 1. Dos algas, por favor.
Ahí es emocional. O si lo oyes con la piel de gallina. És molt brutal. És molt brutal.
Sí, és que no sé per què no l'hem fet abans, això.
So, we the most creative restaurant in the world shuts down, comes and talks to us and said, I know I have to reinvent myself. I want to reopen as a foundation and a creativity lab for Haute Cuisine in 2 years, but I don't know how technology can play here. So we started thinking about how to use our capabilities to help a new industry, like it is the Haute Cuisine industry. And we started thinking how our big data capabilities could start helping this industry. What you're seeing here is all the recipes of El Bulli from 1994 to 2001, and the different, based on the ingredients and the different combinations that were made. Now you would ask, why is this useful? If you see, it looks like a living organism. And what it can help you understand for a chef, it starts understanding immediately what type of combinations they've made, but more importantly, what sort of combinations they've never made. And if they want to create a new dish, what is it, the set of ingredients that they can combine to make a new creativity. I'm going to show you a video of a little bit of how we went on this process, because the most important thing
me comentó para ser embajador de la marca,
was the language, how we're talking to each other.
Una empresa de 200.000 personas, es la responsabilidad que para mí quedar bien con ellos, ¿no? Es decir, que ser ético, honesto, es una responsabilidad. Al final la innovación, la creatividad es una actitud en la vida. Es levantarte por la mañana y hacer cosas. Gracias a la tecnología, el Bulli Foundation tiene sentido. La gran cuestión es el compartir el conocimiento. Un plato de la historia del Bulli como restaurante. El espíritu del Bulli, estos abrazos, ¿sabes cuál es, no? Pasión por lo que haces, compartir, libertad y riesgo. El Bulli se transforma, no se cierra.
So for me, the most important thing out of this video is that sentence that he said, without technology, El Bulli wouldn't make sense. The new Bulli wouldn't make sense. And that is an opportunity for us to take technology, to take new industries, and help them transform themselves, help them find new ways of creating, new ways of thinking. I just want to show you a couple of slides more where what we realized by analyzing these recipes is that the way the brain works is by it gives you joy if you discover something new. So if you just eat every day the same thing, it's something that you know. It makes you feel home, but it doesn't give you any surprise. So what you see here is some statistics about how traditional cooking happens. And what happens in traditional cooking is that traditional cooking shares a lot more flavors, but the set of unexpected flavors is very low. If you look at what happens with El Bulli, it's completely the opposite. The set of expected flavors is low, and the set of unexpected flavors is very high. And with doing this, you can start thinking about doing database design, doing visualization design, and doing all the tools about network science that we know how to do to be able to help this industry finish. The first result of this collaboration is something that I want to show you, and that I'll close it in there, because I think it gives an example of how bringing technology and IT and helping other industries can can really change some of the opportunities forward. It is called Wikipedia. It is a database for chefs to be able to create new dishes and share them with the world. Okay, so I've talked about many things. I truly believe that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Giving you a glimpse of how we probably need more and more spaces to play. I think all these networks, SurfNet and the rest, have played a great contribution to this community. We need more things like peer-to-peer networks that help crowdsource movements to foster creativity. Network economics is going to become something to take an eye on and keep a look. And then three things: Internet of Things as an open platform, big data, especially from cellular phone networks, and start rethinking about our industry. Not so much focus on ITC, but as a basis for the rest of the industry to innovate and cooperate. And finally, start brushing up your multidisciplinary skills, because as you see, you will probably need them. Thank you so much. I think there is time for maybe 1-2 questions. Yeah?
Maybe they are so frightened by the word you are describing that they are not they're not willing to raise any question, but I don't see any. Oh, there is one there.
So Barca will keep winning, by the way.
Yes, it's working.
Tell me, why is the last mile 60% of the total cost of the network infrastructure?
Right. I think you can understand it very well if you think about it like a tree. Right. If you think of a tree, the set of nodes in at the bottom, the leaves, is a lot higher. And therefore the complexity increases because you have first a much larger set of links at the edge, and they're very distributed. Plus also, I think in the last mile is where the online meets the physical world. So, so you have to dig roads, and you have to go and you know, if a wire gets cut, you need to send somebody there. If there is humidity in a station, you need to go and fix it. And that starts dealing with a lot of the physical economy, which is about human labor. And then the other component is the service and attention. So if you have a 24/7 calling center, it requires a lot of personnel. People don't like talking to machines. A company like Telefonica, probably 200,000 employees, about 100,000 are on call centers to provide the 24/7 oil and support. And since it's they're handling a part of the network infrastructure that is critical, you need to make sure that it's up and running and that you provide that support. So again, I think it's the penetration, is the density that you have of lines and equipment, the fact that you have to go many times into the home. So you know, sending an employee into somebody's home costs about 60 euros to fix the equipment, and there are still a large amount of population that are not technology savvy. And then this density combined with the support is what brings all that cost up. I'm not saying there is no room for innovation. I think there is a lot, and hopefully we'll see more about self-configuring managed networks from the edge and simplifying some of the equipment in the home, but that's where we are now. Yes.
The one thing I was surprised to see missing from your talk of innovations and so on falls into the category, I guess, of wearable hardware to perform enhancements for the human body or prosthesis for the human body. You know, the Google Glass is probably the current device of interest in this space, but everything from you know, prosthetic limbs to sight or hearing enhancement devices, things like this.
If I understood your question, you were talking about hardware in the body, right?
In, on, around, that act as personal digital assistants kinds of...
Yes. So that's a very interesting one. I think the phone will probably start becoming a hub for a lot of connectivity devices. So I carry one, this one that monitors how many steps I walk, and it wakes me up on the right sleep cycle. Last week I was in California, I was looking at the Google Glasses, and certainly we're seeing more and more of these devices coming up, and they will bring some good things. So for instance, the glasses are great for security, surveillance, but certainly we will raise some privacy concerns, and it becomes a lot easier to take a picture or to take a video. But all these body enhancement, augmented realities through extended hardware, I think that's something that will come, especially with the mobile phone as a hub that will provide connectivity and that it will carry the heavy weight of all the battery and being the communication hub.
Thank you, Pablo. I think we have to finish here because otherwise we will be too late. Thank you, Pablo, for this